It's Thursday night special meeting. This is Thursday, February 11, 2021, 5:30 p.m. closed session start time. And Ms. City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Councilmember Sanchez?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Ibarra?
Here.
Councilmember Figueroa?
Here.
Councilmember Charette?
Here.
Councilmember Reynoso?
Here.
Councilmember Calvin?
Here.
Councilmember Alexander?
Present.
And Mayor Valdivia.
Here. Okay, thank you very much, Ms. City Clerk. Do we have any public comments for closed session?
No, we do not.
Okay, all right, let's go ahead and excuse staff. City Council. Today is Thursday, February 11, 2021. It's approximately 6 p.m. And I will ask Councilman Alexander, sir, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance tonight?
Will you all please stand with me and join me in pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it
stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you very much, Councilman. At this time, we will ask our city clerk to please call the roll.
Councilmember Sanchez? Councilmember Sanchez? He's not present. Mayor Pro Tem Ibarra?
Here.
Councilmember Figueroa?
Here.
Councilmember Charette? Councilmember Charette? Doesn't appear to be on. Councilmember Reynoso?
Here.
Councilmember Calvin?
Here.
Councilmember Alexander?
Here.
And Mayor Valdivia.
Present. Okay, thank you, Ms. City Clerk. At this time, we will ask any public comments. Ms. City Clerk, any public comments tonight?
Yes, we do have some. Lillian, can you please play those?
Yes. Rebecca or Mitch, could you give me access to share my screen?
I believe that Gretel may currently be the host. Gretel, can you go into security?
How did that happen? I actually don't know how to share my screen, Rebecca, so maybe I need to leave and let you be the host.
Is there a security? Do you have at the very bottom of your screen, security?
I don't see it. I have share screen, so I'll do that.
We'll try another route.
Did that work?
No, it did not.
Yeah, I don't have
Another
security at the bottom.
Okay.
The issue that we have is that nobody's host and currently the meeting has no share screen capability. I don't see a host on the screen.
Do we necessarily need a screen share? Can we just play the audio?
No, we need to have a screen share because the screen share has the audio function that they have to select.
Okay, why don't we do this? Shall we just log back out and then we'll let you rearrange that portion? Would that be your recommendation, Mitch?
At this point, because I don't know who is the creator of this meeting, we'd probably have to create a new meeting.
Okay, Amory Arnett is the host now. So Amory, if you have functions,
Yeah, so she would, yeah, just to enable share, so she needs to.
all right.
All right, it should be resolved at this point in time.
Thank you, it is.
All right, Miss City Clerk, there we go. Jillian, rearrange
Hello, this is
that
Commissioner
portion.
Porter
Would that be your
for the
recommendation, Mitch?
speaking on the general plan
At
workshop.
this point, because
For the
I
future of San Bernardino,
don't know
I would
who is
love
the
to see
one, the creator
more
of this
art
meeting,
and our history
we'd probably have to create a
kind
new
of
meeting.
added into the
Okay,
new projects
Amory
that we're
Arnett
starting to
is the
do.
host.
Yes,
I
So
mean,
Amory, if
Please
you have
murals of
functions,
the Arrowhead.
Yeah, so she would, just to enable share, so she needs to.
Sorry about that.
If I may, the problem should be resolved at this point in time. You have the ability to share the screen. Thank you.
Jillian, I'll play them on my end and see if it works.
Okay. What's happening is that somebody's got their playback on. We need to turn the playback off for somebody, whoever's sharing.
Okay, I'll share my screen.
Because you're hearing the delay.
There we go.
Hello, this is Commissioner Porter for the speaking on the general plan workshop. For the future of San Bernardino, I would love to see more art and our history kind of added into the new projects that we're starting to do. I mean, murals of the Arrowhead, murals of old cars like Route 66 lowriders, things like that across our city would make it just about one of the coolest spots in our area. I mean, we really need to embrace the amount of artists that we have locally and start putting them to work and let them do these murals and let them enhance the way our area looks. Also, adding our history into some of these projects, like making the facades look a little old or matching old buildings, things like that will help San Bernardino stand out, especially downtown area where we're going to do all this new development. It'd be nice to have something special the way it looks. I oftentimes mention the Mission Inn, and that's because that festival light is something I'd love to see occur here in San Bernardino. But we don't ever build anything to look old. We try to make it look modern, and it just ends up, tagged up and old and shabby. But maybe if the taggers had some respect for some of these murals, which a lot of times they do, or maybe we could get some taggers to do the murals that some of these are great artists, and get them involved in helping our community build up. I know I'm spending a lot of time explaining the art. You guys handle the general plan, the major things like building and what we're going to do and things like that. But I would definitely, please, love to see art and our Arrowhead put in much of the development that we're planning on as possible. Wouldn't that be cool to see our great Arrowhead all across the city? This is Robert Porter, 4th generation San Bernardino, and I love San Bernardino.
My name is Gigi Pellicero. This is regarding the general plan meeting on Thursday at 6 o'clock. I've talked to the city before and one of the developers about the vision of having an arena at the Central City Mall site, which is a prime location for such a thing, which is like Ontario's Citizen Business Bank Arena, which brings revenue from sport and concerts and year-round events. I hope that this plan comes to fruition rather than low-income housing and such. That is not what San Bernardino needs in the downtown area. As far as housing goes, there are plenty of open spaces in the city, plenty of, I'm sure, eminent domain places that can clean up the city, and retail can be brought in once the city gains the kind of sustainable income residents that can keep businesses open. I really hope that the city comes up with a way to bring in revenue and not just people with low incomes. Thank you.
This is a public comment for Treasurer Ortiz for open session. Good evening, Council. The two items on the agenda tonight, I think, are great and wonderful for the community. The rental assistance grant is going to help a lot of people, especially since we have about 50% rentership in the city. And the kickoff to the general plan is what so many of us have been waiting for. And I ask for each item that we go above and beyond the regular outreach that we see, that we make sure that we are out letting the community know what is available to them, especially for the relief grant. This is such an important time, and a lot of people are hurting, and the moratorium on evictions is about ready to run out in the next couple months. And the general plan is so important to the future of this city for the next 10, 15 to 20 years of what we will look like and what we'll be able to do. Go out amongst your words. I understand you have the consultant, but it's really, really important that we engage the entire community this time around, because so many people are looking forward to providing their input and hopes and dreams of what we can be collectively. And we never fail ward by ward, neither do we succeed ward by ward. It's an entirety, and each of you have a responsibility, yes, to a certain group of people, but as a whole, you oversee all 220,000 lives. So great responsibility. This is an exciting time, and I just ask that you make sure everybody who wants to be included is included in both of these opportunities. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Amelia Lopez. I am a resident of the city of San Bernardino, a member of the Neighborhood Association Council Board, and a city planner for the city. I am leaving my comment for the general plan. I just want to say that the community outreach proposal in the PowerPoint presentation looks good, but there are a few things that I would encourage the consultant to consider. You need to consider that the goal should be to engage more than, quote, the usual, quote, people who attend public meetings. I am one of those usual people. San Bernardino has a large population of Latinos, many whose first language is Spanish. Please include outreach to Spanish-speaking families. We also have a high poverty level, and poverty barriers need to be addressed to encourage low-income residents to participate. Special outreach should also be considered for college and high school youth, for after all, we always say they are the future, and I am sure that they have a vision for the city as well. Community residents typically are not expert planners, but we do live here. We see day to day the things that create problems in our neighborhoods and so forth. And that's the other thing. I see a lot of things about downtown revitalization, etc. You really need to also consider neighborhood revitalization, since we have a lot of inner city neighborhoods that are really deteriorated. Thank you.
And that concludes public comments.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. City Clerk. At this time, we will go right into our staff report. This is item number 1, Emergency Rental Assistance Program Funding Options. I'll turn it over to our city manager.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Thank you. We have before us a quick item, hopefully, to discuss regarding the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. I want to tell you, first of all, why it is that we have to take action tonight. We owe a response, a very quick turnaround on this to the state of California tomorrow. Otherwise, we would have been bringing it to you at the next regularly scheduled meeting next week. There are there's just one basic, fairly fundamental decision that we need to make. We are prepared to make a recommendation, but first we need to lay out what those options are. I think we're going to have a presentation on that from Mike Huntley and Gretel Noble. First I will though hand it over to Mike. Mike, the microphone is yours.
Thanks, Rob. Just for the benefit of City Council, the city's housing division, which is located in the Community and Economic Development Department, does oversee these kinds of programs. If Council does remember, as part of the CARES Act, we did actually receive a little over $1 million. We currently have an active program that's being managed by the county. With that said, there's been some other funding opportunities provided to the city. So I'll hand this over to Gretel and let her cover what the other funding source is and what this new funding source is, and really talk about what those options are. So Gretel. Gretel, a microphone. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. For your consideration and direction, you have a report detailing the options under the State of California Emergency Rental Assistance Program. You are being asked to direct staff to either participate in the state program options A or B, or to implement and administer a local program. Since the state program is rapidly evolving, this afternoon, the state did provide further information and clarification that was not available at the time the staff report was prepared. I will note that information in the latter part of my presentation. As you know, the city has received an allocation of $6.4 million from the United States Treasury to implement a local emergency rental assistance program. The state of California has received $1.5 billion from the U.S. Treasury and is requesting that jurisdictions participate in that program. The state has provided 3 options local jurisdictions can choose. The options are noted in the staff report, so I will briefly summarize them and answer detailed questions at the end of my presentation. Under option A, the city can direct the U.S. Treasury, its U.S. Treasury allocation to the state. The state in turn will allocate what it calls its share or a block grant portion of its funds for the city's benefits and administer the combined funds for assistance to local residents of the city of San Bernardino. The total amount of assistance with the state share would be $13 million. Under option B, the city can request a block grant from the state, and the city then would administer both its own U.S. Treasury allocation and the state's share or block grant. And it is relative to option C that the city has received further information and clarification. Under this option, the city would administer the U.S. Treasury allocation that it has received and adhere to the federal requirements, while the state would also administer a program in the city of San Bernardino with the city's state share. The state program would adhere to the state requirements, and basically there would be 2 concurrent programs running in the city under option C. The clarification provided by the state is that option C is the local program, and that under option C, the state share of the funds would be available to the city under a negotiated MOU with the state. The MOU would define the parameters of the concurrent programs, and additionally, the state has clarified that local concerns about duplication of services and the liability related to that, data sharing and privacy issues would be addressed in the MOU. This had not previously been made clear by the state, or perhaps not something that they had realized. Now, the benefit under option A is that program implementation and administration would be assumed by the state. We would assign them our dollars and they would administer the program. The state would be responsible for all financial audits, program reporting, and liability of duplication of services. Now, under option B, the jurisdiction would, or the city would implement the $13 million program that would comply with the U.S. Treasury requirements and the state overlay regulations. Lastly, as noted under option C, the city would have a local program and the state would have a concurrent program in the city. When utilizing the state funds, the performance timeframe is compressed, requiring that the state funds be fully expended by August 1st. Any unexpended funds would be recaptured by the state and reallocated to other jurisdictions. The city would still have its U.S. Treasury allocation, and the funds that then would be, it would have a time to expend its own allocation until December 31st. The February 12th deadline is particularly pertinent for option B. If the city wants to locally administer the state block grant and its own money per option B, then the city needs to make the election to do that under option B by February 12th, which is tomorrow. It is required by SB 91 that cities choose option B by tomorrow. That concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, I will answer them.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Noble. I do have a question for you on option A, B, or C. Which one of our staff has the adequate staffing personnel to enact either one of these options?
We, as staff, do not have the capacity to administer a program of this magnitude.
Okay, all right. We'll open it up to, I'm sorry, Mr. City Manager.
So it would be our intention to contract with an outside service provider to administer the program on our behalf, a nonprofit who would administer the program on our behalf. We have a plan to move that forward.
Okay, all right, very good. So we would have the staffing outsourcing offered to. Okay, we'll open it up to council members. Councilmember Sandra Ibarra, go ahead, ma'am.
Quick question, Mr. City Manager, and just to clarify, right now we are allocating the funds over to the Housing Authority, and is that who you're thinking would be the who we're going to outsource the funds to administer?
Actually, no. We're looking at a couple of other options to include United Way as one of the options. So I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Gretel, I think that the Housing Authority has indicated they don't have the capacity either.
That's correct.
Yes. So it is actually going to be a nonprofit, not a county entity.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Alexander. You're muted.
You're muted, Council.
Damon, you're muted. There you go.
Can you please share with me who besides the United Way, the nonprofits that you are working with, and during the layers of government that we're trying to do, how does that impact those who apply for this relief program, the time period, by just letting the state handle it as in comparison to letting a nonprofit handling it? Is there a time lag so renters get their money a little slower if they go through the state? You follow me?
Yes, I think I don't think we actually mentioned what the staff's recommendation is here, which is actually option C. We think that we would be able to respond much more quickly using a local nonprofit to administer the program for us. And we also there are some parameters wrapped around the state, the way that the state would handle the money, and certain requirements that the state is imposing, which we think might make the program less appealing and would in fact do some damage to our local landlords. Hey, there's a limit of 80% reimbursement for back rent in the state's program, whereas the federal program allows for 100% reimbursement. And a lot of our landlords, unlike, I think that the part of the reason for that is that this is really, they're concerned about big corporate landlords in the Bay Area, for example, or in LA. We don't have that. We have an awful lot of mom and pop landlords here who will be horribly affected by a reduction in the reimbursement through, as a result of SB 91. So that's part of the basis for our recommendation. But also, we think that local control is a good thing, and we are confident of our ability to engage locals to administer on our behalf. It gives us a great deal more control, and we think it would be more effective. So that is the basis for our recommendation.
So other than United Way, what other nonprofits are you thinking about administering this program to?
We are responding to all this is happening very quickly. So we are still evaluating what our other options would be. So we have to do that we need to do it very quickly because there's a very tight time frame for expending these funds. So we're open to suggestions, but we have to have somebody who's got a fair amount of capacity. This is a lot of money to spend in a very short time.
Okay.
Well, one of my questions that I have, Gretel, is of the money that's been approved since September of 2020, the council approved acceptance of it. How much of it has been drawn down from our residents? Do we have that fact or figure?
No, not in how much has been drawn down. We have information on how many have applied, on how many, what the demographic of that group is, but the response has not been overwhelming. It's not what we had anticipated.
Okay. Well, this is a program that's useful, but again, there's a lot of process for individuals to grab the money, and it seems that the community is, for whatever reason, not been availing themselves of that opportunity.
It has to be, I'm sorry, it has to be COVID-related impact on your income.
Right.
So a lot of folks may owe rent, but they have to show that there's a COVID impact, and they have to owe rent. So some households have applied wanting to get rental assistance, but the dollars cannot be used in that way.
Correct. Okay, thank you. Councilmember Reynoso.
Yeah, this is of vital importance. Obviously, I appreciate everybody's questions, especially the last one, Mr. Mayor. I'm very aware, though, and I share my colleague Councilman Alexander's sentiment about who you're reaching out to, because I know tons of people last year who were at people's doors, who are helping people fill out those applications, who do the groundwork for this, and they dream of the opportunity to connect the community to the funds that are needed. And so with that, I'd like to make a motion that we go with option C, that we run an RFP for a local nonprofit or a collection of local nonprofits to assist the city with the allocation of funds under option C. I'd like for staff to bring back an item to create a committee composed of 3 council members and 2 staff members to oversee the RFP process, the allocation of the funds, and the compliance with the rules and regulations of this funding.
Second.
A question.
Go ahead.
Councilmember Reynoso, option C, which is city administering the U.S. and the state will be doing their own. You're aware of that one. That's the option you're still picking.
Correct. I would ask that the city funds, the 6.4, that we collaborate basically, essentially, through an RFP for one nonprofit or a collection. Ideally, a collection of nonprofits that are doing this work already.
And then the other half the state would administer.
Right.
Okay.
Otherwise, it would be very restrictive with the other options.
Councilman Sanchez.
Yes, this I believe is also the best option. Councilmember Reynoso, I think, is fully aware of the fact that we do have a large amount of money coming in, but the issue is going to be bottlenecking. The issue is going to be not being able to get the money out quickly enough to these individuals who are either being harassed by the landlord, trying to use some sort of self-help illegal tactics to try to get those tenants out. So it's about getting the money out there quickly as possible. The reason why handing over the $13.3 million directly to Sacramento is a bad idea, the entire amount, is because if Sacramento, the bureaucracy there, fails to be able to be responsive to the people here in San Bernardino, we have no recourse. We can make a call to Sacramento and they can tell us they're too busy. Now, to take on the entire amount ourselves, again, alludes back to what I was saying earlier, that there may be a bottleneck. We have a certain bandwidth. And so partnering with the state, option C, putting the $6.9 million coming through Sacramento, having Sacramento administer that funds while we administer the funds directly from the federal government amounting to $6.4 million, doubles the number of individuals who are going to be able to process those applications and get the money to where it needs to be. Now, concerning the committee, it is vitally important that when we're deciding on how to spend $13.3 million. And it's going to be very important that we keep a very close eye on the dispersion and the administration of those funds. So creating this committee, I would ask if the council member would be amenable to adding 2 features to this committee. First of all, the staff bring back that report the resolution reflecting a requirement that committee report back or make any sort of recommendations to this council, a minimum of every 3rd council meeting until all the funds are either dispersed or exhausted, or the grants expire, whichever comes first. Because it's going to be important that committee, those individuals who are keeping an eye on the dispersion of that money, come back to the whole council where we have the power to make and adjust whatever needs to be done, that they come back to us and explain to us what is happening with that $13.3 million. In addition, that staff report reflect a committee made up of Councilmember Reynoso as a chair, Councilmember Sandra Ibarra as a standing member, Councilmember Kimberly Calvin as a standing member, and the two staffing positions to be filled by Gretel Noble, and the second staffing position to be filled by Rebecca Kramer. Would you be amenable to that, Councilmember Reynoso?
Fine. You can add that.
I would see if the assistant city manager, Councilman Sanchez, has the time or the ability to do that before you start assigning people jobs. Maybe that's best left to the city manager as far as those people are concerned. I agree with you with Ms. Noble, but maybe, making your appointment as far as city councilman is one thing, but let staff be assigned by the city manager if you don't have an issue. That's his job.
Mr. Charette, go ahead, sir.
Thank you. I just have one question of my colleagues. And help me understand what I'm missing here. Staff is recommending that option C is the most undesirable of the three options because it places the city in the position. So what don't I understand here? I mean, staff is saying that this is the least desirable, and it puts a lot of strain on the city. If you look at the dates and times and what have you, I'm not mistaken, it says we have to have a committee put together by tomorrow, and I guess that's what you're trying to do, Theodore.
No, the committee wouldn't be. So we are required by the state grant. We are required by the state grant to respond as to whether we will accept the $6.9 million to administer ourselves, or we'll allow Sacramento to administer that money. So that's why we're deciding today whether to allow Sacramento again to administer that money or ourselves. So they're going to look to us today, right now, for direction on that. Now the staff would come back, I would hope by the first meeting in March, drafting the resolution on creating this council committee, so that we can keep a close eye on the administration of this money.
Okay, I'm looking back through the materials and I'm not seeing where I saw that. I just have a problem when staff is recommending that it's the most undesirable of the three options. I have a problem supporting that because they're the ones that have to carry it out.
Okay, Councilmember Calvin. Go ahead.
Rob, didn't you have something to say? I think we got kind of cut you off. You had something.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I did. A couple things. First of all, the language in the staff report, remember, we've been in a hurry on this thing from the beginning. The language in the staff report comes from a PowerPoint that was provided by the state. I won't go so far as to call that propaganda, but it's pretty close. That is not actually our intent, the intent of the staff report. We did not mean that. That was what the state kind of wanted us to say. So,
so then, Rob,
we're going to contradict our own staff report.
So, Rob, are you saying that what I just quoted as the option C being the least desirable, you don't agree with, and you're okay with us going with C?
I would call that the state's perspective. The state put that out there, and
yes.
So no, that's the state's perspective. Is the C is the worst option. The city's perspective, it is the best option. Would be my actual perspective on that. Also, I want to.
I'll stop reading the staff report.
Well, please don't do that. No. Please.
Well, but maybe you need to asterisk it in a staff report. Say this is not our terminology. This is from the state or from the feds, which we know how they screw things up. That's not a problem. So no, I like to support staff, obviously, and I think I always have generally. Because they're the ones that have to carry it out. And so if you're saying that it is not the least desirable and that it's your preferred, then I'm on board.
That is our perspective. I also want to thank Councilman Alexander. If we could retain flexibility in terms of the staff who's assigned to the committee, to support the committee, two staff members, absolutely, but we just have a little bit of flexibility because now we're we're pretty heavily taxed in terms of assigning duties right now. So I'd like to be able to have a chance to make those assignments correctly if possible. I'm sorry, Councilmember Calvin, I cut you off.
No problem, sir. And sitting on the ICH board, I happen to know that there are several organizations that would be willing to assist us with dispersing the funds. And of course, we would need to have one of them would be able to protect us or to assist us in making sure that we're not duplicating services. So there are some organizations who are capable, who have those type of systems. And matter of fact, I believe that the state is expecting that whoever we do choose, if we chose option C, that they have the system, the HMIS system, that would be able to catch applicants who are trying to receive the service more than one time. So, and then that does, we are also then showing in good faith that we're trying to assist landlords as well, and not lessening their amount that they get back, that they will get the 100% of what is owed. Now, I do want to mention that I believe, feel that we should probably look at every type of means of getting this information out. And Mr. Councilman Reynoso has mentioned, creating more of a ground game. I don't believe that everybody's looking at our website to see that we have this assistance available in our communities. And so we would need to look at maybe some of our admin dollars as part of the funding that we receive, because it does have admin dollars built in that we could utilize and create, some folks that would be able to do some outreach for the city and pay them to do that, so that we can get into the neighborhoods and the communities where we need to go, so that we can show that this assistance is available for them, and then choose option C, which I do believe is the best option for us as well.
Okay, thank you. We've had some discussion. We have a motion and a second. Councilman, go ahead.
Yes, I hear loud and clear from our city manager and council member Alexander. I'm willing to strike my recommendations for the staff, but I do want the staff report to include to continue to include the recommendations for who makes up that that council committee, and as well as keeping those 2 staff positions on that committee. Would that be fine with Councilmember Reynoso?
Absolutely.
Okay, Ms. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Would we like to read it again? Would like to read it again?
Yeah.
So I'm going to read mine because I didn't take notes of yours, Councilman Sanchez. Just add it at the end, all right?
Okay, all right.
I'd like to make a motion that we go with option C, that we run an RFP, request for proposal, for a local nonprofit or collection of local nonprofits to assist the city with the allocation of funds under option C. And I would like for staff to bring back an item to create a committee composed of 3 council members and 2 staff members to oversee the RFP process, the allocation of the funds, and the compliance with the rules and regulations of this funding.
Let's see. I didn't write mine down, but I have them in my head. Oh yeah. If City Clerk, you have it. I'm willing
You
to
can
hear
correct if anything's wrong. Okay, so I added that staff bring back a resolution reflecting that the committee report back a minimum of every 3rd council meeting until funds are dispersed or exhausted. That the staff report reflect Councilmember Reynoso as the chair, Mayor Pro Tem Ibarra as a standing member, Councilmember Calvin as a standing member, and
2 staff. But we are
and the 2 staff, and I'll leave it up to the city manager's discretion.
All right. Yes. Leave it up to
Yeah,
Rob.
that's good. Perfect for me.
Okay, are we clear on the motion, council members? Okay, Ms. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Sanchez,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Ibarra,
Yes.
Councilmember Figueroa,
Yes.
Councilmember Charette,
Yes.
Councilmember Reynoso,
Yes.
Councilmember Calvin,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you very much. This is moving to item number 2. We want to remind council members, we will hold all of our questions and comments towards the end. This is a general plan introductory workshop. There will be a formal presentation from staff, and at that time, there is no action required other than a receive and file. We'll turn it over at this time to our city manager, and he will make those appropriate introductions. Mr. City Manager.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, City Council again. This can't really, it's hard to overstate how much this means to the city, the future of the city. This is an enormously important endeavor that we are embarking upon. As you might guess, some of the behind the scenes work has begun already, but this is really the official kickoff of the new general plan and downtown specific plan and development code for the city of San Bernardino. We have not revisited the city's general plan since, I believe, 2004. We have a really great team behind us on the staff side, where it's being led by Mike Huntley and his team, but pretty much everybody in city government has a role. Oliver Mahica has been a critical member of the team to bring us to this point. I want to extend our gratitude to him as well. Chris Jensen too. So we've had a really solid team behind this. Most of the presentation is going to be done by PlaceWorks, who is our contracted planning consultant for this effort. Really a nationally renowned firm, so we feel fortunate to have them on board. But with that, most of the presentation is going to be led by Mike Huntley on our end. So Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Rob. Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, as Rob said, tonight's really our official kickoff meeting tonight. What the intent of the meeting is to do is actually allow PlaceWorks to introduce themselves to you, and not just the member of PlaceWorks, but the other consultants that work as part of the team. We also want to let City Council and the community know how they can be involved and what their parts are with the process. We're also going to go over the work program, talk about the schedule, and we're also going to provide an opportunity for City Council to ask them questions. Now, I do want to point out that, people may ask, well, it's been a number of months since we've executed the contract. What's been done, right? I do want to point out that usually when general plan updates start, the first thing that's done is what we call the document dump. So we'll get a long list of requests from consultants. My staff has been busy working, putting all that information together, but just as they produce it, they need to provide it to PlaceWorks and their consultants, and then they have to go through all this information, volumes and volumes of information, so they can get a clear-cut idea what direction we're going to go in. So really, at the end of the day, there's been a lot of work being done behind the scenes. Public may not see it, but a lot of work has been done to date. Staff has had a number of internal meetings. Matter of fact, we have weekly meetings on Friday talking about the next step, what's happened, what kind of information that they need. I really want to point out, too, that this is the first of many meetings. We do anticipate coming back to City Council on March the 17th, where we're going to roll out the general plan website. We're also going to take and define even more of the public outreach. You're aware that right now we're going through a pandemic, which makes it difficult to do the appropriate outreach, and the PlaceWorks team is looking at a variety of methods to make that happen. I do also want to point out that, I know Rob said this as well, actually Oliver Mahica, who's on the meeting tonight also, he's the planning manager for the city, but he's also the project manager for this project. So now what I'd like to do is pleased to introduce the PlaceWorks team. Woody Tesher is the principal and the project manager for this. Woody's been in the industry for many decades. I won't go that far. I won't say how many, but many decades.
I don't think anybody on the council had been born yet, but yes.
Probably. Not to mention he's been a professor as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Woody Tesher.
Hey, Woody, I'll bet you on that one.
Okay, good. We'll run a contest. Thank you.
All right. So with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Woody. He's going to introduce his team and walk us through the PowerPoint. Woody?
Thank you, Michael. I am excited to be here tonight. I've had deep roots. I grew up in Southern California, know San Bernardino well, et cetera, through all the years and its manifestation. So it's really exciting. So good evening, Mayor Valdivia and members of the City Council. Can we pull up the presentation as well so we can begin to get into that and help move us forward as well? Perfect. So let me just I'm going to reduce one image here as well. So let me again say good evening to the mayor and members of the city council. I use the term excited. We truly are about the opportunity to join you this evening to share with you our roadmap for working with you and the residents of San Bernardino in the developing the policy and regulatory documents that will propel the city in becoming really what you want to be and what needs to be for the future as well. Well, as has been mentioned, we've been sort of confronted with the challenges of the pandemic and frustrations about it and implications of it. We are truly enthused about the possibility of moving forward in recognition of the sound foundation of initiatives and successes that have occurred in San Bernardino in the past years. This is a strong foundation to build the planning process on. If we could move to the next slide, please. So what we'd like to cover here tonight, we'd like to, as Michael said, introduce the consultant team who are the participants in the process. We want to spend a little bit of time to discuss how you will be involved as council throughout the process. We want to also have considerable discussion about how the public at large will be involved. This obviously is timely given some of the input you heard from the public comment period here tonight. We want to spend a little bit of time about what we're producing. What are the outcomes of this program? What are the process and a roadmap to get there? We want to talk a little bit about why this is important. You know, while this is a legislative requirement to do this work, there's some real important outcomes of the process that will be important to everybody within the city. I want to share with you the schedule and then obviously provide the opportunity for questions and answers. Next, please. So this is a indication in the list of the various firms who are involved in this effort, the planning effort itself. We, throughout these firms, employ the full range of technical skills from planning to housing, economic development, environmental justice, CEQA, circulation, mobility, infrastructure, environmental resources, as you can see on the screen itself. We have an aggressive program of public outreach that we will share with you in a few moments that we will be sharing with National Core. National Core has a deep history and deep roots within the community of working with you through various planning assignments itself. And looking at the team, I would like to emphasize two key points, and this is, it sounds like a commercial, but I think it's really important to share with you. Well, the plan and the creation of these kinds of plans can be what I call a paper exercise, producing documents, and maybe in this era, digital documents as well, that satisfy certain requirements. Our emphasis in the types of planning documents we prepare is on implementation, on how they are really influence achieving the visions of the community and are transformative in that respect. And as I indicated, many members of the team that you see here on the screen have a deep track record of experience working within the city and within the greater region and county at large as well. Next slide, please. So if we were not isolating ourselves because of the pandemic, these faces on the screen are people who would be roaming your offices. You'd be seeing at city council meetings. We'd be working with hand in hand throughout the process. So unfortunately, we're in the stage of working virtually, but let's all be optimistic that before we're through, that maybe hopefully even within this year, these are the faces that you will be seeing as we move further through the planning stage, and particularly as we want to reach out and work into the communities with the residents of the community and the various wards of the community itself. We divided ourselves into a number of teams. We have a management team, as you see at the top of the screen, that I am leading the project management. Cece Lagrange is with us here tonight. You'll see her face on the screen a little bit later. She is the deputy project manager. And very importantly, as we well know, that engaging the public, a key word that was used previously in one of the comments from one of the community members as well, is very, very important. Wendy Nowak, who is with us tonight, is leading that effort, but in concert with, again, staffing from and support from National Core, who has been engaged in various aspects of the community previously. Sandra Espadas is also joining us here tonight. Next slide, please. We also have a team of individuals who are working on the key areas of planning, housing, economic development, but we also recognize that the importance of the downtown specific plan and have assigned an individual who is skilled and developing plans of this particular nature that are effectively revitalization of communities. Karen Gully will lead that team, and she is also with us tonight and will be part of the presentation a little bit later. Next slide, please. And we also have other supporting, if you will, in technical areas of the plan in terms of mobility, infrastructure, CEQA, development code, and climate and resiliency. So as again, these are faces, they're all smiling now. So we assume that they'll be smiling once we get here on site and begin to work with you through the process as well. Next slide, please. So as we indicated, one of the key aspects of this project is working with you, the City Council as well. You know, legally, a city council is involved at the end of a planning process like that. Legally, there is a hearing, a review of the documents that are produced during the general plan process, a period of time where you listen to the public and their comments on those documents, and then you consider their input and make recommendations at the end of the process on the various projects that are being prepared here. That's not our approach. Yes, it'll be a part of our approach, but our approach is that this is going to be a continuing stream of conversations and discussions and engagements of the City Council along with us and the community through the process. And there will be at a minimum very periodic, regular updates where we are, what we're doing, what we've learned, where we're going, what the issues are, and how we're moving forward. As was indicated a little bit earlier, we will be coming back to you specifically with a more detailed discussion of how we are going to engage the public at the March 17th meeting. Both the website will be operational at that point in time, and we will share with you, what we'll provide an overview tonight. We'll share with you the details about how we're going to reach out to the wards and the neighborhoods and the various constituency of the community. We also will be seeking feedback for you at key planning benchmarks, as one of the initial tasks is to develop an overall vision about what San Bernardino as we move in the future. And we'll want your input and feedback to what the work that has been generated through the public process. As we begin to look at that opportunity, that map of land use within the community, what areas are going to be conserved? What areas are going to change? We're going to want your particular input and feedback and confirmation of that. And as we develop alternatives for the areas, similarly, a robust discussion of these and a confirmation of a selected land use plan. And then the next bullet on the screen, obviously that stage of the public hearings, review and CEQA review of the planning documents are prepared and certification of those. And then very importantly, staying on board afterwards. It doesn't end there, because that is the beginning of the adoption process in the implementation of the plan itself. Next slide, please. So as I indicated, the public engagement is incredibly important part of this process. I'm going to hand it over to Wendy Nowak, who is leading that effort, to share with us our thoughts at a very high level about where we'll be moving in the public participation plan. Wendy?
Great. Thanks, Woody. And good evening, Mayor and members of the council. You know, to me, the public outreach part of the general plan update is the most, dynamic and exciting part of the update. And it's where we really roll up our sleeves and sit down and listen to so many different players in the community, the public, the council members. We're talking about coordination with the departments. There's a lot of energy that goes on with the public engagement. And so that's, connecting with the community is key in this effort. One of the things I thought was interesting is that in the public comments, when the community member mentioned, that the community may not be expert planners, but the reality is the community is expert in the city and knows all the nooks and crannies and the things that we should be thinking about. So it's our job to take all of that information and listen and integrate that into the planning documents that we're preparing. And so where do we start with all of this? As Woody mentioned, we thought it was going to be something that was really important to team up with National Core and with Sandra and Alexa to build off of the existing working relationships they already have. There's a lot of connections and meetings that they're having with community-based organizations, with business owners, school districts. We really want to get that diversity in the outreach and making sure people are aware and know where those opportunities are to engage. So we wanted to hit the ground running and know that they already have it. Conversations. And so how can we integrate the new things that we need to talk about in the general plan to what things they're already doing? So we really want to leverage that. So also in taking those relationships, we've got to figure out how we get to the community. So if we could go to the next slide. which is also a new challenge for us with COVID and the limitations. You know, I look at all the pictures we have, and most of them, I long for those days where we're sitting around a table like you see in this slide, and we are just getting markers, and everybody's getting that opportunity to get in there and provide input. So we've had to get a little bit creative in how we've been doing that digitally. And that also creates challenges for us too, new challenges on how we get to people who are low income, may not have access to the digital tools. And so that is something we're definitely building into the public participation plan. So the key to that public participation plan is going to where the people are and communicating how they do. So we talk to all of those the key players that we talked about on the last slide and figure out the best way to get in front of people or to share information so they know when those meetings are and they know what kind of information is coming out and how the information we get from them is used in the plan. So we'll be looking at things, you know, hopefully we'll be able to start having these citywide meetings. We'll be in person. We'll have General Plan Advisory Committee and Downtown Advisory Committee meetings, and Karen will talk a little bit more about how that works. And looking at opportunities for pop-ups using social media, the city's website, as we mentioned, we're going to be building that in the next month or so, and newsletters. So we really want this to be layered so that we're looking at all those opportunities to get the word out and so that people know what's going on. Next slide, please. And so the kinds of things that we will share in that engagement are, you know, some of the basic information about what people need to know, like what do we do for planning? Where can they provide input? How is this important to me? Because as you hear, you know, planning can have a lot of jargon and there's state requirements. So really boiling it down to the essence of why is this important to me and how can I influence that plan? And then, of course, how can I participate? Making sure there's that back and forth dialogue so that people know that there's an opportunity to engage. They see what the information they provided and they see how that information was applied to the decisions that we're going forward with. Next slide, please. And so bottom line to us, there's a lot of things that go into making a successful engagement process, but we truly want to take all of these things and make a process that is transparent, that creates an ongoing dialogue and shows the community that their input has been integrated into the plan in some way. Thank you.
Next slide, please. So let's circle back and look at what the principal products are that are being prepared as a part of this process as well. One is we've heard the general plan's old. It is indeed reflective of the community a number of years ago, and things have changed. The population has evolved, the needs, the economy has evolved, et cetera. So our key work product through this effort, a key work product, is the updated general plan, one that complies with particularly the recent statutory requirements that has affected the content and the direction of the plans itself. There's a need to begin to focus upon, again, understanding of where the city is today. There's also needs to reflect, as indeed, the community as it is today, your residents, business members of the community, about what you are and what you want to be, and to provide that roadmap of actions. But we also want to create a plan for you, as I indicated before, characterize it. It's almost a cliche to call it a living and breathing document, something that is adaptable to change, because we recognize that any long-term document like a general plan that looks out 20, 25, 30 years or so cannot be absolutely predictive of what the community will be like in those 25 and 30 years as well. So we need to build in those mechanisms that keep it adaptable and change. So every 20 years or every et cetera, the period times between the general plan, that the plan doesn't become obsolete, but it's moldable to the community as well. Part of the general plan, a required component, is the housing element. Now, we call this out separately because it is on a separate time schedule. Housing element, is probably everyone on the council is aware, is indeed targeted to be completed and submitted to the state for review and approval through the late part of 2021. So the first year of our planning process as well. That housing element is indeed charged with identifying sites for housing at all income levels within the community, with numbers that have been allocated to the city of San Bernardino to meet those targets. Obviously, it's very tight at the hip with the general plan, which one of the components of the general plan is that diagram of land use, which indicates those areas in which change will occur and what those uses will be as well. As we mentioned, obviously, the other key product coming out of this is looking at the downtown and the opportunities of the downtown area and focusing on the downtown and creating the policies and guidance and guidelines and direction for the evolution of the downtown as a center of community identity, heritage, and activity as well. And indeed, arts could be very, very important part of that as well, with obviously an important objective to foster economic activity and improvements in the short term. And then finally, in terms of products, we'll be preparing the code, the rules and regulations, what we sometimes call the zoning ordinance, that it then carries out and establishes the rules and regulations by which those other documents on the left-hand side of the screen are implemented as well. Below that, we are required through the California Environmental Quality Act to review and to report the consequences and potential impacts and mitigation for each of those 4 documents that you see above. And then I think very important foundation for all this at the bottom of the screen is that public outreach and engagement program that Wendy just shared with us as well. Next, please. So let me quickly talk a little bit about, you may know this, but I just want to spend a couple of minutes about, people will ask, well, what is this general plan? Well, just to remind ourselves, this document is required by state law for every city and county. And the key words are emphasized about what that general plan is. It's comprehensive, it's long-term, and it's a plan for the physical development, et cetera, of the community. This is a requirement, again, of the state of California. Next slide, please. When we look at that requirement, what it is not defining the zoning. It is not defining the development standards on such things as building heights or parking requirements or drive locations or landscape. That's the purpose of the development code that will be a subsequent document that we'll talk about as well. Though we do establish standards for housing and non-residential density as a part of the plan. The general plan also is not the design guidelines about dealing with the design of a particular aesthetic or character of the community. That, again, is a separate document ultimately as well. And the general plan in and of itself is not a guarantee for project approvals, but you may want to, as part of the general plan, as we look at implementation, look at those kinds of projects and those kinds of uses that you want to expedite as well. Next slide, please. There are some new components and requirements of the content of the general plan since the last time the city embarked on the general plan. Well, one, obviously, are the current targets for how many housing units will be produced in the city during the next 8 years at every income level. There are also, through legislation, a number of topics that previously may not have been addressed or only touched upon marginally that indeed have risen to the level of importance as we address the general plan, those addressing such issues of climate change, vulnerability to risks associated with climate change, the ability to be resilient in the effect of climate change and adapt. Also, in another new, if you will, subtlety of the general plans that have occurred in the areas of circulation and mobility, to envision streets as not only being the place for the automobile, but it's the place for transit, it's the place for the pedestrian, it is the place for the bicyclists, et cetera. And the notion and the characterization of that is it's a place that's complete for multiple modes of transportation as well. And then most recent legislation that will be reflected in this general plan is a element that looks at the, if you will, equity and the provision of environmental justice to all members of the community, particularly the disadvantaged members of the community as well as thinking about public health as being an important part of a policy direction that is set by a community. Next slide, please. So this is a chart and a table of what will be the various, what you might call, technically under state law, they're called elements. You might think of them as chapters, the various topics that will be addressed in the general plan. Those highlighted in blue are those sections of the plan that are required by state law. Those that are not bolded or not highlighted in blue are those that are considered optional, or in some cases like Parks and Recreation, maybe subset of another element like open space as well. What's important in looking at that as we prepare these optional sections or the subsections of the plan is that once approved by the City Council, each of the sections of the plan carry the same weight of law and implementation as those that are indicated in the bolded blue text as well. Next slide, please. So in each of those chapters, there's certain content that's required, et cetera. One is a set of diagrams. So I think the most obvious for everybody as we move forward into the general planning process will be that diagram that depicts locations for housing and locations for commercial uses and industrial uses and locations for open spaces, and defines indeed the standards for what those would be. So there's a series of maps and diagrams that are officially part of the general plan. A mobility plan will have things like roadways and bikeways, et cetera, as part of the plan. So a series of diagrams that are incorporated. There are then also is the hierarchy of what we call goals, policies, and implementation programs. The goal is, when we use the term goal for a general plan, it's a little bit different than if we're writing a goal for a business that one of us may, or any of us may work in, where certain goals may quantify the end. What the goals here of general plans are really intended end states. What will be the change, such as adequate housing for every resident within the community? The policy at the next level down is really that roadmap of action oriented to achieve that goal. So if our goal is adequate housing for every member of the community, the policies determine or specifies to me what are the actions to achieve and accomplish that goal, achieving all that housing. And then the implementation program, the next level down, are the actions that are going to carry out those policies, et cetera, and identifying who is responsible for it, the time frame, and in some cases, budgeting implications as well. Next slide, please. So very importantly is understanding the role of the general plan in the communities. That first slide indicated that this is something required by state law. Once the general plan is in place, it's important to know and acknowledge law that indicates that every subsequent development entitlement, every subsequent planning document, every subsequent regulation, guidelines, et cetera, capital improvement programs, et cetera, all must be found to be consistent with that general plan. And the Supreme Court has referred to the general plan as the city's constitution. So as we think about using that term for the general plan, this is kind of an exciting time for all of us, because this is your constitutional convention to develop the constitution for the city of San Bernardino. Next slide, please. So as we think about San Bernardino, again, often we think about a general plan as being, a general is almost a misnomer, is a terminology, because while we do look generally at the city as a whole, the city has wards, it has neighborhoods and districts as well. And so the focus, while there will be indeed broad statements about the city at all as a whole, we will be looking at the wards that comprise the city. We'll be looking at these policies and analyses and visions related to those, as well as to the neighborhoods and districts within the wards themselves. And a part of the public process will be driven down to the grassroots of those levels as well. Next slide, please. So importantly, we said that one of those products is the specific plan. And I'd like to hand over to Karen to talk a little bit about our direction on the specific plan and how we're moving forward.
Thank you, Woody. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. It is a pleasure to be here tonight and talk a little bit about a very special component of this project, and that is your downtown specific plan. As many of you know, there have been many planning studies done over the years, design studies in and around the downtown, focused on the Carousel Mall. Some of those examples are to the right here on this slide. But really never have you had a comprehensive, specific plan for the downtown that really tailors your zoning recommendations and your design standards and other requirements for future development. So this is an amazing opportunity, and the fact that it gets to happen simultaneously is very special indeed. As Woody mentioned, the specific plan will implement your general plan, and it will also guide and have in it very tailored zoning for the downtown area. One of the key objectives through this process is to make sure that we do this in such a way that eventually future development can be streamlined in the downtown area. Another key objective of your downtown specific plan is to begin to incorporate the plan for the Carousel Mall that will also be underway in the planning stages during this time. And so at the end of the day, the Carousel Mall project will be integrated fully with the specific plan and will also be recognized in the general plan. Next slide, please. So we've taken a look at all those other planning studies for the downtown. We've also taken a look at the Waterman and Baseline Neighborhood Specific Plan, which is right near this area. And we have met with staff and talked about a preliminary boundary for the specific plan. This boundary, in our opinion, really captures the historical urban core of the city, in addition to adding key sites around your downtown Metrolink station. It's often common that when you begin a specific plan process such as this, there could be some slight changes to the boundary as you go along and you see other opportunities that you want to fold in to the planning effort. But this is our preliminary boundary. 8th Street on the north, Sierra Way on the east, the railroad tracks to the south, and the I-215 on the west. Next slide. Wendy got into a lot of detail about the outreach program for the overall effort. For the specific plan, we're going to have a separate outreach program, and but it will include some of the same techniques for the overall general plan. We will initially be having virtual meetings, hopefully in person later this year. We will have a separate advisory committee that will meet, I think, about 6 times during the process. We will have separate community workshops focused on the downtown, pop-up events as well. And finally, we get to have something kind of exciting. It's a 2-day charrette. A charrette is an intense working session over a period of 2-3 days' time where the public's invited to attend. We're working, we will be physically working at tables and having a chance to explore kind of the physical form and urban design considerations for the downtown area. Next slide, please. We've been asked to accelerate the schedule for the specific plan, and so we've created a time frame that goes about 18 months, and that includes the specific plan itself as well as the environmental needed to cover it. And we anticipate the specific plan being wrapped up in late spring, early summer of 2022. Next slide.
Thank you, Karen. The other product I won't dwell in is really updating your development code. Obviously, it will need to be updated to reflect the updated general plan, and will need to be updated to reflect the specific plan itself. But we're looking at this comprehensively. The city has before we have been involved in this process, have been looking at the development code and beginning to look at revisions that are necessary to make it a more usable document, to guide development, to review development in the future as well. For example, we understand that some of the administrative procedures need a fine-tune revision maybe as well, and a look at and a review to look at how indeed the kinds of projects that are desired in this community can be facilitated in a way and that the administrative procedures not become an obstacle to meeting the objectives and the visions of this community as well. And we'll begin that early. We'll begin that process of looking at the administrative procedures prior to actually completion of the general plan or even the specific plan, et cetera, because we have that opportunity to begin to dive into the weeds relative to how it's operating today, looking at the problems associated with how it's operating today, and begin to suggest options for how it can be improved for the future. Obviously, the land use zones will need to await some of the outcomes of the general plan and the downtown specific plan. But again, the map will be, maps and the zoning districts will be revised to reflect what comes out of that process. And then obviously the completion of the development regulations associated with each of those zones. Some of the things that I mentioned earlier, like parking standards and building heights and property setbacks, et cetera. You'll also see on this term something that's new relative to terminology that's used in codes, and that's the use of objective design standards. Some of the recent legislation that has been enacted by the state relative to accelerating the production of housing has basically directed that the subjective design guidelines that we have been used before cannot be the condition by which a quantity or a of development on a site, the capacity, the number of housing units can be constrained by those design guidelines. You can only indeed affect and control the types of housing on a site or the density of housing on a site by specific standards that any reader of those standards can come to the conclusion as to their interpretation. This is an important change to be mindful of as we move forward in updating the development code. Next slide, please. So, as we said at the outset, this is something that's required by regulation, but it can be something much more important to the community of San Bernardino. As we think about it, as we mentioned earlier, it's been many years since the community has come together to discuss, debate, and mutually build a plan comprehensively for the future. It's an opportunity when we refer to the community coming together that becomes an inclusive process involving everybody. It enables thinking about the community holistically, not project by project. This is important. Most of our, our planning decisions, the projects that come before the planning commission or the city council are individual project sub areas of the community, a block, a couple blocks, just an individual parcel, et cetera. This is the ability to step back from those day-to-day decisions, those weekly decisions that are made by the Planning Commission and City Council, to think about how all these individuals fit together, become a comprehensive and consistent direction for the future of the community. It's also for the opportunity for the community to react to, indeed, state legislation and look at what are mandates coming down from the state and look at crafting your approach in addressing these rather than having it necessarily being directed by Sacramento. As I mentioned before, this is your constitutional convention, an important opportunity. Next slide, please. Importantly, one of the early steps in the planning process was beyond, if you will, wading through all that data and all those reports that Michael mentioned earlier, is the step where we define and work with the community in defining a vision for the future of the city. And when we characterize a vision, this is an imagination. It's an aspirational statement about what you can be. It's an opportunity to define and thinking about what is best, strengthen what is almost good, and correcting what is not working. And it celebrates the uniqueness and quality of life of San Bernardino. And that's all important messages as we begin to craft this vision with the community, et cetera. And once that vision has been set in place, this is the opportunity to develop the blueprint for which that vision will be realized. And then very importantly, offer clarity for all users, residents, business persons, developers, city staff, planning commission, city council as to what that vision is. Next slide, please. For residents beyond those aspects that I just mentioned, those characteristics I just mentioned, it's the opportunity to have and define and have input to the policy about how we are going to accommodate change. We're going to continue to grow. And for some, growth and change can be disruptive. But this is the opportunity to define growth in a way that complements rather than disrupts, preserves what's important for the community and protects what's important. It's an opportunity for the residents to ensure that there's access and equity throughout the community, to look at opportunities for housing that is affordable for everyone, the opportunity to create places to work, shop, dine, be entertained, recreate, meet, and socialize with friends and neighbors. It's the opportunity to look at how residents can find new job opportunities within the community. And also importantly for residents is when we look at economic development as a strategy, that economic development provides the end result, potential revenue, to provide for the services and programs that support residents within the community. Next slide, please. For the business community, indeed, it's an opportunity to, again, think about inviting investment, create excitement about San Bernardino as a place to invest and reinvest in the future. It enables adjustments in this process too, as I mentioned before, changing economic markets and trends. What was being demanded in the marketplace for retail uses 20 years ago is not being demanded today. And as a result, we're seeing a very dynamic change in the retail market, et cetera. So indeed, the importance part of the business community is a plan that enables adjustments to the kinds of businesses that may be out there 5 or 10 years from now that we don't know about, et cetera. But also it's an opportunity to capitalize for the business community upon what's emerging, the new technologies, the new kinds of businesses. And San Bernardino to be a place that captures those new technologies and businesses, as well as to provide new jobs for those residents, et cetera. And it's also an opportunity for the business community to have clarity about the city's direction and intent for its future. Next slide, please. And then for everybody on the list as well, indeed, it's the policies that will be defined that manage and target growth, provides an efficient mobility and accessibility system, protects the community from natural hazards such as wildfires, flooding, and protection of open spaces and natural resources. Next slide, please. This is the schedule. This is not the schedule. This is a conceptual graphic of the schedule. The schedule is many, many pages long and very, very detailed, but this sort of illustrates the primary timeframes of the major work products itself. Basically, the overall planning process will take us into 2023. And you see the steps in the various components that will take us to that year. The general plan, of course, has the longest time frame here, and you see the various steps in that schedule of analyzing existing conditions, developing that vision statement that I mentioned this upcoming summer, looking at our land use alternatives, selecting a plan, developing policies, and creating the planning document itself. On a much shorter schedule because of our requirements to submit to the Department of Housing Community Development, housing element, we are looking at, as you will see here, completing that document by fall of this year. And so that is an accelerated schedule. And obviously it has a direct relationship back to the general plan and the land use analyses, as well as a specific plan. As Karen mentioned, we're on about an 18-month cycle here, a little bit longer than the housing element, but indeed briefer with the intent to try to create shovel-ready activity at the end of that process as well. And then the development code will, of course, look at initially the administrative procedures we discussed, I discussed a few minutes ago, and then the zoning maps and the categories have to follow out by the time we have the selected plan as well. There are 3 stages at which we will be looking at CEQA. We have to take a look at environmental reviews for CEQA for the housing element, for the downtown specific plan, and then cumulatively for both the general plan and the draft code. And those round bubbles show the 3 points at which CEQA will intersect with us in the process. And then obviously overlaid on this that we again review with you in March is how the public process and each of those steps of the process intersect with each of these particular components and elements of the planning program itself. Next slide, please. So we concluded our interview presentation with a slide showing a firework, a celebration. And that's what we are about here, to come to a process that indeed enables the entire community to celebrate indeed its future. So that concludes our presentation. We are here, our staff is here for any questions that you may have, and we can direct the questions accordingly. And again, again, besides Karen and Wendy, Maybe Cece, if you can wave your hand if you're on the screen, and Sandra, if you're on the screen somewhere here. I don't see Sandra, but Sandra, there she is. That's the trouble with these little squares on the screen, is finding people's faces. But Sandra is also here from National Corps. Thank you. So back to.
Thank you very much, Woody. We appreciate the presentation from PlaceWorks, and we thank you for the professional experience and certainly the standards of excellence for our community. And I do appreciate some of the elements. As a mayor, I want to highlight some of those important elements to our city council. I do appreciate the robust public engagement. I think that's critical. Our community is desirous of this. On page, the PowerPoint slide, the existing working relationships, I want to make sure that we include the San Bernardino International Airport, our San Bernardino Chamber of Commerce, San Manuel, Cal State, and San Bernardino County Transit Authority. I think those are existing relationships that we need to also include and make mention of. I do appreciate the robust engagement component, because that is certainly the avenue in which to convey and really gain the feedback. And so I appreciate the various outreach opportunities for our community. And the work program objectives. City council members, this is a long process, and we need to be patient with the process. There are 4 components: the general plan, the housing element, the downtown specific plan, and the development code that will be amended. And of course, the state law provides those provisions. What I did also enjoy in the presentation is what this is not. I think that's key for us council members. So I want to encourage our city council. Sometimes we have this perception of what a general plan is, and I really enjoyed particularly this slide, which indicated what a general plan is not. So thank you for that. I think we should pay particular attention. And finally, the importance of the planning process. I think some of these policies for our community really should enhance the business community aspects, specifically the economic development component. I know that that's a portion in a subdivision in those chapter of the general plan, but I would almost insist that we also have that as part integrated into the general plan. Our community is certainly welcoming of jobs. We want these opportunities in our community, as evidenced by our San Bernardino International Airport and the robust growth at the airport. So this certainly invites the investment opportunity and enables job creation. So again, I thank you as a mayor. I appreciate you, Woody. Thank you for your experience. At this time, we'll open it up to council members. Councilmember Ben Reynoso, go ahead, sir.
Hey, thank you for the presentation. It was very thorough. My questions are regarding obviously the community outreach. Do you have like a set number of these kind of meetings that you plan to have with community members?
Yes, in our scope, we have outlined the number of meetings that we have. So some will be, we have a handful of community workshops at strategic decision points. So if we're looking at the land plan or reviewing the draft goals and policies, and then we also have a set number of pop-ups and whatnot. So we do have to be strategic because, you know, the city is large and there are a lot of opportunities to engage. But yes, the scope identifies clearly what those numbers are.
So let me just supplement that in the detailed public participation plan that we're coming back to the council with on March 17th, all those will be outlined and specified for you to take a look at. And as you look at it, I think one of the lenses you may want to look at is it an appropriate distribution from your standpoint of your knowledge of the community, because you know the community better than we do, even though many of us have worked within the community. So it's really for your review and feedback as we bring it to you.
Well,
I take that for granted because I just do it. So thank you.
Yeah. I guess my next question more so is not necessarily direction, but maybe some advice. When it comes to social media, are you considering having a pretty robust budget for, I don't know how much you've used advertising, but that is a way people are at home right now. And if you're not seeking to meet them at their homes, I expect kind of to see, I'm a resident here. I expect when I'm on social media to see an ad from you, you know? Like
yeah, and there's a lot of different ways to look at it because we have the city's current, social media. So some people will go to those current outlets and then tracking down those that don't, because those are the ones that we want to get right, because most of the people that are showing up at the meetings and providing comments are the ones that know where all these resources are. So that's one of the things we'll also be working with Sandra on as well, because even now when she was listening, to the meeting and we were talking about some opportunities, she's like, oh, I'm working here and I'm doing this so we can talk to these people. So we really want to get into those networks and the social media networks of her resources as well.
So you're just talking about the city's social media?
No, I'm saying we can explore the ads too. No, so when we normally do a social media program, like with the public participation plan, if we're going to roll out and say that there's a community workshop, we will use the cities, we will get messaging that we can share with all of these different organizations that we've been talking to and say, hey, could you promote this in your networks so that we can get that out? So you may use ads, you may use those networks as well.
But you won't be funding the advertisement is what you're telling me.
Well, I'm saying that's something we can explore. So we'll look at where we have that in the budget and the costs, and then see what we can promote.
Sure, thank you.
Name, phone number, and
Okay, Councilmember Barr, go ahead, ma'am.
Yes, I believe this question will be for Wendy as well and Sandra. I looked at your staffing on your team, PlaceWorks, and it doesn't. It's not reflective of the community that we have in our city. How would you go about in having bilingual meetings for the community members? Also, what is your vision in the community input? Are you looking into going small and then big, or looking at the big picture and going and zooming down into the neighborhoods specifically?
Great questions. So a couple things. We have done translation in a lot of our meetings in other cities. So we have done that either by translating materials, or we have also had translation during the actual workshops or meetings. So that's something we'll be exploring with staff to make sure that we have that covered appropriately throughout. When we put together that public participation plan, we'll run that by them, see where we're proposing that, and then you guys will take a look at it as well, and then you can let us know if we have that covered appropriately. And then your second question, I'm escaping the second question. The first one was translation. The second one?
Scale, big and small.
Oh, big and small. Oh,
how do you plan on tackling this? Going onto small portions throughout the city and then focusing on the big picture, or looking at the whole city and then zooming down into each different neighborhood?
Yeah, and it goes a little bit in and out throughout. So for instance, if we're starting with the vision, that's big because everybody's looking at the vision for everything. But now some people may have visions for their neighborhoods, right? So if we are looking at these opportunity areas of maybe change, because some areas are maybe established neighborhoods or other things that probably won't see some change. But if we start to narrow down some of these areas, we can start to focus on details about those specific things. So you'll see maybe pop-ups in neighborhoods, or you'll see a focus on a particular topic. Karen's working on downtown, so that's an easy one to call out, right? So there's very detailed things that'll be talked about there, but she's doing a specific plan. But we'll move around to each one of the neighborhoods, and then we'll be able to drill down a little bit more when we have some of those community-wide workshops and then pop-ups in those neighborhoods. So it's a little bit of back and forth.
And then, Wendy, I just wanted to add one thing to follow up on the first part of your question. We have a whole army of younger staff that do reflect the community in every way. And although all their resumes weren't necessarily included in our proposal, they are part of the plan.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Kelvin.
So as far as you just explained, how you'll be going, your focus will be going in and out. When you're going in, will you be utilizing or calling upon council members to actually give you more information or clarity on the wards, so that to help to assist you in reaching the people?
Yes, I mean that is crucial. I mean, you guys know your wards the best, as well as your constituents. And so, Woody, I think you can maybe clarify, don't you normally do your council member interviews to kind of get...
the starting point, that's only one step, and there needs to be multiple discussions with each of the council members regarding the wards. We do have a task item that we've actually delayed a little bit, but due to COVID, but we're still going to proceed with this fairly shortly. But we're going to meet with each of you on a one-to-one basis to, again, have those conversations about, your expectations versus the process. What do you want out of this, et cetera, for your ward? What are the issues within your respective wards, and help guide us through. You're also going to be a conduit of identifying those organizations that we should be focusing in on in terms of that public outreach program. Who are the key players? Who are the key networks within those wards and those areas that we need to be tagging with and teaming with, if you will, as we move forward? Absolutely.
Yeah, and if I may add, Councilmember,
Go ahead, please.
It's really helpful for us to have that information, because overall, when we're doing the outreach plan, we want to know what a successful outreach program was. So at the end of the day, when we're done in 3 years, what does it mean to say we had a successful outreach plan? Is it that we got out and it was, 1,500 people, 5,000 people participated? It's that we need to talk to different groups that we have not been able to get to before. So we need to know what things to work towards. So when we're developing that plan, we're making sure those things are addressed so that you can look back and say, okay, for staff, this is what we need. For council, this is what's important to us. So we can work with what scope we have to try to hit all those key points.
And so I know that you mentioned how the work that you'll need to do in working with the master developer for the downtown project. Could you just expand a little bit about that and how you will, because it's important. So how will you work together?
Sorry, I didn't mean to disappear. Like any other team member, they are, of course, a very important player once you've selected that developer. They will also have their own team, and we regularly work with on projects that have separate development components going on, and so essentially they're part of the team, and we anticipate involving them in our outreach process. They will be a big part of our charrette, yeah, that's pretty much it. We're one team.
So you work around them, or they bring to you what they have already laid out and decided for the downtown, and then you work around that, or how do you integrate them?
It's an iterative process. They're going to want to create a plan, and it will be a preliminary plan. It will have various components that they feel make a lot of sense. We're there to oversee that, review it, provide guidance, provide recommendations, make sure that they're taking into account what we're hearing from the community. And so, yeah, that describes it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Alexander, go ahead, sir.
Okay, about the development code, land uses, revitalization, design standards, administrative procedures for housing developments, all that. Do you come to the council members? Because I'm interested in that. Let me just be very frank. I'm interested in the administrative procedures as far as businesses and housing developments and how housing developments are built. If it makes it easier for developers or businessmen or anything like that in our city. You said there was a change in the California regulations. Woody, what changes were you referring to? If you can just clue me in, I'd appreciate it.
One of the development reviews issues for many have been the notion of design review of projects, et cetera. Often cities will have design guidelines for residential neighborhoods, for commercial districts, et cetera. It depends upon the community and the extent of those. Some of them are very prescriptive. If you're in Santa Barbara, you have to design a building that has, if you will, of a certain mission style, et cetera, without getting into the specifics of that as well. The recent change in legislation stated that in a housing project, for housing, specifically for project housings, it doesn't apply to commercial, that design guidelines that are subjective, based upon a reviewer of a project that may like, a building's wood trim versus maybe a concrete, if you will, use of concrete in a building. And if that is a basis for rejection of housing, a reduction of housing density, you can no longer do that. What you would have to do is translate those guidelines about, if you will, wood trim or concrete into something that anybody would agree is the same interpretation of what that standard is. So you have to create standards rather than guidelines for, indeed, residential review. And that's very, very critical. And the cities, this is a new, relatively recent requirement. And we're working in a lot of cities right now who are wrestling with that, trying to take what have been the basic guidelines that they have been reviewing development projects for years and entitlement processes, and going back and seeing what they can extract and keep and translate it into a standard that in many respects is quantifiable.
Okay, and so that's dealing with housing. Commercial, Director Huntley, is that anything that we just approved during our last meeting? How are you guys working conjointly with the development code here?
So for the benefit of our consultants also, at the last council meeting, Councilman Alexander did bring up his interest in us reevaluating design guidelines. Really, at the end of the day, he wants to improve quality of development throughout the community. So what he's asked us to do is go back in and look at it. We currently don't have an active design review board. So I think that's one of the things we'll look at as we work through the update to the general plan, is to provide some, some guiding principles associated with that, and then subsequent to that, incorporate something into the development code. What I'm hearing from Woody is that as we deal with residential, we need to create those standards which will create quality development. And when it comes to commercial, we can actually, provide design guidelines for good quality infill commercial and industrial projects. So that's something that would be worked into the overall project as we proceed. However, what I want to point out to the council members, to include Councilman Alexander, we really want to hear from you in regards to what you're looking for, those types of quality projects, samples. If you see things, whether it be within the community or driving around other communities, if you see things that might be beneficial as we're looking for it in regards to design standards, or I should say projects in other communities, please share that information when you get into those workshops. That's the appropriate time to share your thoughts.
Okay, I'm always shouting smart city solutions. So I'm going to keep shouting smart city solutions until it catches on. So, that'll be a rallying cry, Woody. There you go, and your team.
I like a part of the vision statement that we said we're going to mention. I hear a key word for that vision statement.
Roger that.
Okay, thank you, Councilman. Councilmember Ibarra, go ahead, ma'am.
One last question on my end. On the schedule that you provided us, where do you anticipate the workshops happening? Winter, spring, fall, next year?
Maybe I'll answer initially. Again, part of that public participation plan, we'll be back next month. We will share that with you, but they will occur throughout the process. The big workshops, there are a number of key benchmarks. There is a point in time where we're developing a vision, the overall vision, that we need to engage the community because it's the community's vision, et cetera, at that point in time. As we're looking at identifying areas of the community, neighborhoods, district, wards, et cetera, where change will occur from what you indeed have on the ground today, those will be discussions with the community as well. And as we develop the ideas for what happens in those areas, that will be another benchmark. And then we select the plan. So those are key stages at which you basically engage the community at various stages. And there are different components of the public participation that are particularly relevant to that phase of the plan you're in as well. And then as we develop policies towards the end of the plan, we also will engage the plan. So it occurs at various steps. Again, as we come back to you next month, we'll show you diagrammatically where those fit into that overall concept schedule that we shared with you earlier tonight.
Okay, yeah, because as a council member, I wouldn't mind getting started and trying to get the vision from my constituents, for example, and have that readily available to you when you reach out to me and just give you an idea of what their vision are.
Great. Well, we'll definitely work with you on that. I mean, great, appreciated input.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, City Council. We appreciate it, and thank you for your questions and comments. That concludes this portion of item number 2, and we appreciate, again, PlaceWorks. Thank you very much for your professional help and assistance here in our general plan, and thank you for tonight's presentation. At this time, I'll point to our city attorney. My apologies to the public. I just overlooked our report out on closed session, and Ms. City Attorney.
Thank you, Mayor, council members, and members of the public. We did have a closed session that preceded our open session workshop, and the council discussed a matter of anticipated litigation, but we do not have any reportable action.
Okay, thank you very much. And this concludes tonight's special workshop. And everyone have a good evening, and thank you again for joining us tonight. Good night.